Don't forget to subscribe to the Special Stories channel. We will have videos every day. Do you have a story to share? Leave it in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. The young nurse Abigail worked every day and loved her job. She treated everyone with kindness and care, which made her well known among the hospital's patients. However, this also made her more emotionally drained as she felt the pain of each person who came in. She always put herself in their shoes, which made her more generous with the patients but also caused her to suffer when one of them passed away. However, one day, something happened that would change her life forever. Abigail was on duty in the hospital late at night, and things were quiet when an ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed out with a young man and a young woman, both badly injured and unconscious. Abigail was always ready and did everything she could to help the doctors save their lives. Hours passed, and unfortunately, the young man did not make it, but the young woman, Naomi, survived. However, she was in a coma, and the doctors said it could take days or months for her to wake up. Soon after, the families of the two young people arrived at the hospital, and it was a shock for both of them to learn what had happened. Abigail then learned everything that had happened. The two were a couple who had come from a party with some friends. The young woman's boyfriend had had a few drinks and, as a result, crashed the car at high speed into a pole. Neither of them was wearing a seatbelt, which caused them to suffer so many injuries. The young man did not survive and passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital, while the young woman, Naomi, suffered a head injury and was in a coma. Naomi's parents wept for their daughter's state and prayed for her to wake up soon, but only time would tell when or if she would improve. Abigail, like other nurses, continued to care for Naomi as the days went by. She developed a special affection for Naomi because everyone said she looked like Sleeping Beauty due to her beauty and endless sleep. 90 days passed and she remained in the same vegetative state, showing no reaction. Naomi's parents visited their daughter every day, and even though she couldn't hear or speak, they talked to her about all the news they had. This touched Abigail, as she found the love they had for Naomi to be beautiful. It was a kind of affection that Abigail never experienced, as she was born in an orphanage and was never adopted. Days passed, and Naomi was still in her endless sleep. Abigail continued to work at the hospital and checked on her daily, changing her for and providing other medical care. Since she spent so much time with Naomi, Abigail felt closer to her, even though she showed no reaction for several days. However, Abigail noticed that Naomi's mother had started visiting her daughter alone. When Abigail asked about her husband, the woman became sad and said that he had passed away a few days ago. Abigail, like other nurses, began to take care of Naomi as the days went by. Abigail developed a special affection for Naomi because everyone said she looked like Sleeping Beauty due to her beauty and endless sleep. 90 days passed and she remained in the same vegetative state, showing no reaction. Naomi's parents visited their daughter every day, and even though she couldn't hear or speak, they talked to her about all the news they had. This made Abigail emotional because she found it beautiful how much they loved her, a love that Abigail never had because she was born in an orphanage and was never adopted. A few more days passed, and the beautiful Naomi was still in her endless sleep. Abigail still worked at the hospital and visited her daily to check her condition, change her for, and provide other medical care. Because she spent so much time with her, Abigail felt closer to Naomi, even though she showed no reaction for several days. Abigail noticed that Naomi's mother started visiting her daughter alone. When Abigail asked about her husband, the woman became sad and said that he had passed away a few days ago. Abigail felt her pain and realized that she was going through a very difficult phase in her life due to the loss of her husband and the state of her daughter. Time passed, and it had been 4 months since the accident. Naomi's mother was there as always, but this time she seemed especially sad. It was Naomi's birthday, and her mother wanted to throw a party and give her daughter many gifts, but it was impossible at that moment. Abigail took special care of Naomi on that day, although it wasn't much, it was the most she could do for her. However, while changing Naomi's clothes, Abigail noticed something strange in her belly. It seemed swollen. She immediately called the doctor on duty. The doctor said it could be an accumulation of fluid, gas, or something similar, but he would do an exam to find out. During the exam, the doctor and Abigail were shocked to discover that Naomi was pregnant. The doctor immediately called the police and reported the discovery. Several police cars arrived at the hospital and began the investigation. Due to all the commotion, Naomi's pregnancy became news everywhere. The doctors believed it was impossible for her to be pregnant by her deceased boyfriend because she had suffered a serious accident, undergone surgery, and was still in a coma. The cameras in the hospital were checked, but nothing strange happened near her room. Naomi received even more special care from all the hospital staff as her pregnancy progressed, and Abigail wondered what the future would hold for this child born to an unconscious mother and a recently deceased father. Sometimes, Abigail would look at Naomi and wonder what she was thinking about all of this. Naomi's face seemed serene, but to Abigail's amazement, Naomi opened her eyes and looked into the void for a few seconds before closing them again. The doctors checked on Naomi, but she didn't show any other reaction that day. Naomi's mother was deeply confused. She wondered how her daughter could be pregnant in such a state. She didn't like to think that worse things could have happened to her. However, even though the doctors believed it was impossible for the child to be from her boyfriend, who had passed away due to a serious accident and was still in a coma, they performed a DNA test. They compared samples of the mother's DNA with samples of the deceased father's DNA and amniotic fluid to determine who the father of the child was. 2 weeks later, the result came out, the child was indeed from her deceased boyfriend. This pregnancy was considered a miracle by everyone, but due to Naomi's condition, her pregnancy could be a risk to her life. However, Naomi's mother was against doing anything to the baby because, to her, the child was not to blame. Naomi received even more special care from all hospital staff. Gradually, her belly grew, and Abigail wondered what the future would hold for this child born to an unconscious mother and a recently deceased father. Sometimes, Abigail looked at Naomi and wondered what she would think of all this. Her face seemed serene, but to Abigail's surprise, Naomi opened her eyes at that moment and stared into space for a few seconds before closing them again. The doctors checked on the young woman, but she did not show any other reaction that day. However, the next day, Naomi's mother screamed for help. Naomi was awake and trying to say something, but she couldn't. She was very weak from being unconscious for so long. It was a miracle that all of this was happening. The doctor said not to say anything yet about her boyfriend or father, but the pregnancy couldn't be hidden. Naomi looked at her belly and cried, but she still couldn't speak. Her mother comforted her and said everything would be okay. Gradually, Naomi was able to move slowly and speak while she was still recovering. Her mother told her that her boyfriend couldn't be there at the moment and that her father was working. Naomi found it strange that neither her father nor her boyfriend had appeared, which made her nervous. So they had to tell her the truth. Naomi broke down when she learned that her father had passed away. However, she barely reacted when she learned that her boyfriend hadn't survived the accident. The pain she felt from losing her father was terrible. Even though she was hoarse, she told them what happened with her boyfriend. They had fought, and she had ended the relationship. However, he couldn't accept it, and they argued constantly in the car. Due to the confusion and alcohol, her boyfriend crashed the car. Abigail heard everything from outside the room. Naomi's crying made her cry too. She wanted to do something to ease the young girl's pain, but she couldn't do anything. That night, Abigail talked to Naomi. It was a special moment because she felt like a friend, even though Naomi was speaking for the first time. It was a good conversation, but Naomi's sadness was visible on her face. She said she wanted to get out of there soon, but the baby was about to be born, and she wouldn't keep him. She told Abigail that she was angry at what was inside her, and that if she had woken up earlier, she would have taken him out by force. That shocked Abigail, but she tried to understand the pain that wouldn't go away. A few weeks later, the baby was born. Naomi didn't want to hold him and didn't even want to know if it was a boy or a girl. Abigail observed everything, but she couldn't blame the young woman because she might have had post-traumatic stress or postpartum stress. A lot had happened to Naomi, who finally got discharged with her baby. However, he was given up for adoption because the man didn't want to see him ever again. 20 years had passed. Naomi was now a successful married woman with 2 young children. She tried to forget the past, and her husband knew what had happened to her years ago and did everything to make her happy. She needed therapy for years. Her mother died a few years after she woke up, which made her even more sad at the time. However, she wanted to move on for her husband and children. But sometimes, the weight of the past came back to her memories, and no matter how much therapy she did, the past wouldn't let her go. She tried to forget the child she had given up for adoption, but sometimes she found herself thinking about how he or she was doing. But as soon as she thought of the child, she felt a mix of sadness and anger and remembered the day of the accident. Because of this, she tried to forget the past and focus on the present. Naomi owned a flower shop. Growing roses and plants was her hobby, which eventually became her main job. She felt calmer when surrounded by the beauty of nature. She loved receiving couples who wanted to make romantic surprises and bought beautiful bouquets of roses. There was a couple who frequented her shop and spent many minutes admiring the flowers. When she looked at them, she remembered when she was young with her deceased boyfriend. The girl picked up a cactus and said she would take it. Naomi didn't find it interesting because few people buy cacti, but the young girl said she admired cacti because they are one of the toughest plants that exist and a symbol of strength. However, the only sad thing is that to adapt to difficulties, they had to create thorns that prevent others from touching them. Naomi was impressed by the girl's wisdom. She gave her the cactus, and the couple left. A few days later, the couple was there again, and Naomi went to greet them. The young man said they were going to take a rose because someone very dear to them had died. Naomi noticed the sadness in both of them, but one of the boys seemed more affected. She then gave them one of the most beautiful roses she had without expecting anything in return. They were both surprised and grateful, and the couple reminded her of herself in the past. Coupled with the pain of losing someone close, it made her remember even more. Days passed, and she felt the past creeping into her mind more and more. She thought about it a lot and eventually made a decision. She would search for the child she had given up and find out if they were okay. Maybe then she could forget everything that happened. Naomi talked to her husband and explained everything to her young children in a more gentle way since they were too young to understand everything that happened to her. Her husband supported her decision, and she began to search for her past. She started by visiting the orphanage where she had left her child. She was nervous but knew that she wouldn't find any children there anymore since it had been 20 years. But as she entered the home, she heard someone call her name. It was Abigail, and Naomi was confused because she didn't remember her. Naomi explained everything that had happened while she was in a coma, and Abigail listened attentively. However, talking about the past still made Naomi anxious. She asked Abigail what she was doing there, and Abigail was honest. She said that Naomi's case had affected her deeply, as she was there for every moment from the arrival of the accident until the moment Naomi gave birth to the child. Abigail visited the orphanage occasionally to check on the child's well-being, and in these visits, she became attached to all the children. Knowing what it was like to live in an orphanage, she developed a strong bond with them. She started to frequent the orphanage more and more until an opportunity arose to work in the infirmary there. Without thinking twice, she applied for the job. From that day on, she said she had found her reason for living and that she loved all those children, which is why she continued to work there. Naomi asked about her child because she wanted to see her. And because she still felt that something was missing in her life and a weight that she didn't understand always came to her conscience. Abigail looked at her for a moment and said, "I stood by your child's side from the moment she came in until the day she left. Your baby was never adopted and left when she turned 18. I still have contact with your child, but I need to let you know that you are seeking contact, so I cannot tell you anything more about her whereabouts." Naomi understood and gave Abigail the address of her flower shop. Upon leaving, Naomi noticed some cacti at the entrance in a higher location, so the children couldn't reach them. The jars had the symbol of her flower shop on them. She asked Abigail why there were cacti there, and Abigail said she liked cacti because they are a symbol of strength. However, the sad thing is that in order for them to adapt to difficulties, they had to create thorns that prevent others from touching them. But she left them high up so as not to hurt the children. At that moment, Naomi's heart pounded. She asked who brought the cacti to her, and Abigail said it was one of the girls who lived in the orphanage. Naomi left crying without saying anything to Abigail, but finally she discovered that her baby was the girl who always went with a boy from her flower shop because she spoke the same words about cacti as Abigail. She also lived in the orphanage, and she felt a mix of emotions that she couldn't describe. She hardly slept that night. The next day, while she was at the flower shop, the same girl from the previous day walked in. Naomi was emotional and first apologized to the young girl, but she immediately said it wasn't her. Naomi was surprised and listened to her. She introduced herself as Marta and explained that she was born in the orphanage but was adopted at 14. She always kept in contact with Dominique, who was Naomi's son. She explained that with Abigail's help, they found out where he was, but Dominique never had the courage to talk to his mother because he knew what happened and thought she didn't want him. Nevertheless, he asked for help from Marta and pretended to be her boyfriend so that he could go to the flower shop and see his mother without raising suspicions. But one of his childhood friends had recently died, which had upset him. Abigail contacted him, but Dominique was too sad and still thought his mother wouldn't want to meet him. So Marta went to Naomi to at least try to talk to him. Naomi and Marta immediately went to Dominique's house, which was a simple place, but Naomi could see the various roses he had bought at the entrance. She rang the doorbell, and Dominique opened it, accidentally calling her mom. Naomi hugged him immediately, and they both cried with emotion. They talked for hours, and Naomi apologized for leaving him in the orphanage, but Dominique said it wasn't her fault and that she did her best for him at that time. Dominique also told her that Abigail always treated him well and protected him. She was always there for him, which made Naomi happy to know that someone took care of her son when she couldn't. Dominique met Naomi's husband and brothers, and he became part of his mother's life. Naomi knew that the past couldn't be erased, but she started to love her son. She wished she could go back in time and change her decision, but time never goes back.
Thanks for watching Special Stories. Subscribe for more videos.